Hey there, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling your request, head-on diving into Thailand's economic outlook for 2024 and beyond.
Yeah.
You want to know, can Thailand thrive even if the global economy goes a little haywire?
Right.
We've got the goods to figure that out.
Okay.
We've got reports from the IMF and the World Bank, news from the World Economic Forum, even some snippets from a recent IMF speech at Cambridge.
Lots to unpack.
Yeah, so looking at these sources, the big question seems to be, can Thailand thrive even if the world economy takes a turn for the worse?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's one the IMF is really grappling with. Their research suggests that a potential global trade split, think like Cold War vibes, economic blocs, could cost the world trillions.
Trillions, okay, yeah, that's officially bad news. But how does Thailand fit into this whole global trade showdown?
Well, the IMF report highlights that emerging markets like Thailand, which rely heavily on external financing, could be vulnerable in this kind of fragmented world. Imagine.
Right.
Capital flows become more volatile, access to international funding gets tighter, not really a recipe for economic stability.
Definitely not. So choppy waters ahead for Thailand.
Potentially. But here's the good news. The IMF report also points to proactive policymaking as one of Thailand's strengths.
Okay.
They've weathered storms before, and the IMF seems to recognize that.
Okay, so that's reassuring. But what does proactive actually mean in this context?
Well, think of it like this. The IMF is urging Thailand to have a solid rainy day fund, or in economic terms, sufficient fiscal buffers. That means having enough financial reserves to handle unexpected shocks, which, let's be honest, seem to be happening more and more these days.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like an emergency fund, but for an entire country.
Yeah.
Speaking of being prepared, your request specifically mentioned GDP. What's the outlook for Thailand's economic growth?
Yeah, so the IMF paints a bit of a mixed picture when it comes to global growth.
Okay.
They're projecting a somewhat lackluster 3.1% growth rate, with a big chunk of that slowdown attributed to, you guessed it, China.
China's economy is slowing down. It's everywhere I look.
It is. It is. Now, while the IMF doesn't single out Thailand's GDP specifically, they do mention that inflation in emerging Asia is expected to be around 2.1% in 2024, which is basically on par with advanced economies.
That's true.
Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. Inflation seems to be the hot topic everywhere these days.
You said it. And the report dives deep into the recent global inflation surge, breaking down contributing factors like those supply chain disruptions everyone's been talking about, and of course the impact of the war in Ukraine.
So many moving parts. It makes you wonder how anyone can make sense of it all, let alone make predictions.
Right. But the IMF, in their infinite wisdom, stresses the importance of something called structural reforms to help boost productivity and tackle these challenges.
Reforms, always with the reforms.
You and me both.
Yeah.
But honestly, they do have a point.
Okay.
Imagine it like this. Structural reforms are like giving your house a much-needed renovation. Okay.
You might have to deal with some temporary inconveniences, but in the long run, it'll make your house stronger, more functional.
Okay, that's a pretty good analogy. But let's be real, not everyone loves renovations, even if they're for the best.
You are so right. And the IMF knows it?
Okay.
Their report actually dedicates a whole section to the social acceptability of structural reforms.
Wow.
Basically, they're saying, hey, we get it. These changes can be tough, so governments need to be smart about how they implement them. They emphasize the importance of clear communication and targeted measures to address people's concerns, ensuring that everyone benefits from these reforms, not just a select few.
Okay, I'm actually impressed they acknowledge that.
Yeah.
So often these reports feel very top-down, like they're disconnected from the realities of everyday people.
I hear you. But it seems like the IMF is trying to bridge that gap, at least in this report.
Right.
Now, speaking of bridging gaps, you also mentioned Thailand's economic relationship with the rest of the world. Right. We've talked about global trends, but what about Thailand's place in all of this?
Well, remember that IMF speech from Cambridge we mentioned? The one by Kristalina Georgieva?
How could I forget?
The head of the IMF.
Yeah.
It was quite the event.
Okay.
And in her speech, Georgieva emphasizes the importance of the IMF adapting to this changing world, right? It's not just about providing financial assistance anymore. It's about being a relevant and responsive partner to its members, supporting them through these, well, turbulent times.
Interesting. So it's like they're trying to be more than just a lender of last resort. They want to be a true partner to countries like Thailand.
Exactly. And one of the ways they're doing that is by shining a light on the challenges posed by a potential global trade split. She didn't mince words, warning that it could have a significant impact on emerging markets like Thailand.
Okay, so we're back to those choppy waters you mentioned earlier.
Right.
But what does that actually look like for Thailand?
Well, imagine this. Global trade relationships become strained, access to international funding gets more difficult, and investors get more risk-averse.
Right.
It's not a pretty picture, especially for a country that relies heavily on trade and foreign investment.
Definitely not the economic stability we were hoping for. So what's the solution? How can Thailand navigate these potential disruptions?
Well, Georgieva didn't just highlight the problems, she also offered some potential solutions.
Okay.
One of her key messages was the importance of global cooperation, even or perhaps especially in a world that seems to be, drifting towards fragmentation.
So even with all this talk of trade wars and economic blocs, there's still a role for countries to work together.
Absolutely. In fact, Georgieva argued that it's more important than ever for countries to find common ground and build bridges of cooperation, especially on issues like climate change, technology, and global debt.
Okay, let's unpack those one by one, starting with climate change. That's something that affects everyone.
Great. Exactly. And in her speech, Georgieva highlighted the importance of investing in climate resilience, particularly for emerging markets that are often on the front lines of climate impacts.
Makes sense. Thailand has already experienced its fair share of extreme weather events in recent years.
Right. And those events can have a devastating impact on the economy, disrupting supply chains, damaging infrastructure.
Right.
So investing in climate resilience isn't just about protecting the environment, it's about protecting the economy, too.
So it's like building a stronger foundation for the economy, making sure it can withstand those shocks.
Exactly. And that brings us to technology. Georgieva argued that investing in technology, particularly in emerging markets like Thailand, is crucial for boosting productivity and creating new opportunities.
So it's about embracing innovation and using technology to drive economic growth.
Precisely. And it's not just about fancy gadgets and high-tech gizmos.
Right.
It's also about things like improving digital infrastructure,
Okay.
fostering a more tech-savvy workforce, and creating a regulatory environment that encourages innovation.
Right, because technology is constantly evolving. So it's not just about catching up, it's about staying ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And finally, Georgieva addressed the elephant in the room, global debt.
Ah, yes. The D word. It seems like everyone is worried about debt these days, from governments to businesses to individuals.
You're telling me. And Georgieva didn't sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
She acknowledged that high levels of debt pose a significant risk to the global economy, especially for emerging markets that are more vulnerable to external shocks.
So what's the solution? How can countries like Thailand address their debt burdens while also trying to stimulate economic growth?
Well, Georgieva stressed the importance of finding a balance between fiscal responsibility and supporting economic growth. She talked about the need for countries to implement credible fiscal frameworks, improve debt transparency, and explore innovative debt financing mechanisms.
So it's a delicate balancing act.
It is.
But it sounds like the IMF is committed to working with its members, including Thailand, to find solutions.
Absolutely. They've got skin in the game, so to speak.
Right.
They want to see their member countries succeed, and they're willing to provide support and guidance along the way.
Well, that's reassuring. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from the potential for a global trade split to the importance of climate resilience and technological innovation. But before we get too caught up in the global picture, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, Thailand's own history of proactive policymaking. Can you give us some concrete examples of what that looks like in practice?
Absolutely. Thailand has a track record of implementing policies that have helped to strengthen its economy and improve its resilience.
Okay.
For instance, remember those fiscal buffers we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Well, Thailand has done a pretty good job of building up its foreign exchange reserves over the years, which provides a cushion against external shocks.
That's good to hear. So they've got some savings tucked away for a rainy day. What other examples can you share?
Well, Thailand has also made significant investments in infrastructure in recent years, including transportation, energy, and telecommunications. These investments not only boost economic activity in the short term, but they also lay the groundwork for long-term growth and competitiveness.
It's like they're building the roads and bridges that will allow the economy to keep moving forward.
Exactly. And let's not forget about Thailand's efforts to promote innovation and entrepreneurship.
Right.
The government has launched a number of initiatives aimed at supporting startups, attracting foreign investment in high-tech industries, and fostering a more innovative business environment.
So they're trying to create an ecosystem where innovation can flourish.
Yes.
That's important, especially as the global economy becomes increasingly knowledge-based.
Absolutely. And it's not just about government initiatives. Thailand also has a vibrant private sector that is increasingly embracing innovation and driving economic growth.
So it's a combination of factors, government policies, private sector dynamism, and a willingness to adapt to a changing world.
Exactly. And I think that's what gives me cautious optimism about Thailand's economic outlook.
Yep.
They've faced challenges before, and they've always found a way to bounce back.
That's the Thai spirit, right?
Yeah.
Resilience and adaptability.
Exactly. But it's not a time to rest on their laurels.
Right.
The global economic landscape is becoming increasingly complex and uncertain, and Thailand will need to continue to be proactive, strategic, and forward-thinking to navigate the challenges ahead.
Well said. So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
Right.
We've talked about the potential risks and challenges facing Thailand's economy, but we've also highlighted some of the country's key strengths and its history of proactive policymaking.
Exactly. And we've started to explore some of the key themes that are likely to shape Thailand's economic outlook in 2024 and beyond, such as the need for fiscal responsibility, the importance of regional cooperation, and the ongoing importance of structural reforms.
Yes, there's so much more to unpack.
There is.
We haven't even touched on the World Economic Forum article yet, which seems to offer some interesting insights into the potential of capital markets.
And we still need to dig deeper into that IMF annual report and see if there are any hidden gems in there that might be relevant to our listeners' question.
So many insights, so little time. But don't worry, listeners, we're not going anywhere. We'll be back in just a moment to continue our deep dive into Thailand's economic outlook. Okay, so before the break, we were talking about Thailand needing to stay agile in the face of a potentially bumpy global economy.
Right.
And this World Economic Forum article you flagged,
Yeah.
it's like a master class in economic agility, you know?
Okay.
It highlights how even European Union members are hesitant to pool resources,
Right.
which is kind of holding them back, especially when it comes to things like green technology.
It's a classic case of too many cooks in the kitchen, right?
Exactly.
Everyone wants to be in control,
Right.
and it ends up hindering progress.
Exactly. So how does this whole European drama relate to Thailand?
Well, it highlights a really important point.
Okay.
Relying too heavily on external funding can be pretty risky.
Right.
Especially in a world where, geopolitical tensions are kind of simmering.
Yeah.
If even countries within the EU are hesitant to share resources, imagine how much harder it could be for Thailand to secure funding from, say, international institutions or investors if things get really messy on the global stage.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
It's like relying on a friend to lend you an umbrella when you know they're notorious for, like using it themselves and then forgetting to give it back.
That's a great analogy.
Right.
That's a spot-on analogy. So what's the alternative? We can't just rely on financial handouts forever.
Only not. We need to, learn how to build our own umbrellas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where this article gets really interesting.
Okay.
It argues that revamping capital markets could be the key to enhancing Europe's competitiveness without sacrificing stability. And guess what? This could hold some valuable lessons for Thailand, too.
Okay. Break it down for me. Capital markets. It sounds a little technical.
It does, but it's actually pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Imagine it like this. Capital markets are like a bustling marketplace where businesses can connect with investors to secure funding for growth, for expansion.
Okay.
It's about creating a more self-reliant system that's less dependent on those unpredictable global capital flows we talked about earlier.
So it's like building a local farmer's market instead of relying solely on, those big supermarket chains.
You got it.
Okay.
And just like a thriving farmer's market supports local farmers and strengthens the local economy, a strong capital market can fuel the growth of essential businesses and infrastructure, even in a shaky global economy.
That makes sense. But could Thailand realistically pull this off? I mean, we're talking about a pretty, significant overhaul of the financial system.
It's definitely not easy. But it's a strategy worth considering, at least. Remember how the IMF emphasized the importance of structural reforms to boost productivity?
Yeah.
Well, developing a more robust capital market could be a key piece of that puzzle. By making it easier for businesses to raise money within Thailand, you're attracting more domestic investment, encouraging innovation, and ultimately creating a more resilient economy.
So it's about empowering local businesses to kind of drive economic growth from within.
Yes.
Okay, I like it. It's like that saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day.
Right.
Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime.
Exactly.
But in this case, it's give a business access to capital and you fuel an entire economy.
I love that
Yeah.
you've got a knack for these economic analogies. And you're absolutely right. It's about creating a sustainable system that empowers businesses to thrive from within.
This is reminding me of something we discussed earlier, too, the importance of regional cooperation.
Yeah.
Could stronger capital markets also help to strengthen Thailand's economic ties within ASEAN?
That's a great question. And the answer is yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Imagine this. ASEAN countries working together to harmonize their financial regulations, creating a more integrated regional capital market.
Okay.
This would make it so much easier for businesses in Thailand to tap into investment opportunities in neighboring countries,
Right.
and vice versa.
So it's like building a regional network of those farmers markets, where each market benefits from the other's success.
Exactly. It's about leveraging the collective strength of the region
Right.
to create a more resilient and interconnected economic ecosystem.
This is all starting to paint a more optimistic picture for Thailand's economic future.
Yeah,
It's not just about weathering the storm.
right.
It's about building a stronger ship and, setting sail toward a brighter future.
I love that. And speaking of navigating towards a brighter future,
Okay.
there's another point in that IMF annual report that I think is worth highlighting. Remember that section on capacity development?
You mean all the training and technical assistance they provide to their member countries?
Exactly. They specifically highlighted some really interesting projects in Thailand, focused on, you guessed it, strengthening economic ties and cooperation within Southeast Asia.
So even while acknowledging the potential for increased global fragmentation, the IMF is actively working to support regional integration.
They are.
It's like they're saying, hey, we get that things might get messy globally,
Right.
but don't worry, we've got your back here in Southeast Asia.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it shows that even in a more divided world,
Right.
there's still a role for international institutions like the IMF to foster dialogue, collaboration, and yes, even a little bit of economic matchmaking.
It's like they're playing economic Cupid, shooting arrows of cooperation across the region.
I love it.
Right.
And who knows, maybe those arrows will spark some exciting new partnerships and initiatives that will help to propel Thailand's economy to new heights.
Well, let's hope Cupid's aim is true. Now, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here.
Okay.
But we've covered a lot of ground, and I'm starting to see a pattern emerging.
Tell me more.
Okay.
What kind of pattern are you seeing?
It seems like Thailand has a few key things working in its favor, even as the global economy throws its, curveballs.
Right.
We've got that proactive policy making, those rainy day funds, infrastructure investments that you mentioned.
Right.
Then there's the potential of these capital markets to fuel growth, foster innovation.
Yeah.
And of course, there's the power of regional cooperation, with Thailand, playing a key role in strengthening economic ties within ASEAN.
You've summed it up perfectly. It's not all smooth sailing, of course.
Right.
There are definitely challenges, risks to mitigate, uncertainties to navigate. But with the right strategies and a bit of that famous Thai resilience, I think Thailand is well positioned to navigate these choppy waters ahead and emerge even stronger.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
But before we get too carried away with our optimism here,
Okay.
let's dive back into that IMF speech from Cambridge.
Okay.
We haven't quite squeezed all the juice out of that yet, have we?
Not even close.
Okay.
And I have a feeling there might be a few more golden nuggets in there that could be relevant to our listeners' question.
Okay, lead the way. What did Georgieva have to say that could help us shed even more light on Thailand's economic prospects?
Well, remember how we talked about the IMF's concerns about those high levels of debt,
Yeah.
especially for emerging markets?
Right.
Georgieva addressed this directly in her speech.
Okay.
She emphasized how the IMF is actively helping its members reduce debt and build those stronger financial buffers we keep talking about.
So it's not just about lecturing countries about fiscal responsibility. They're actually offering practical support to help them get their financial houses in order.
Exactly. She specifically called out the Resilience and Sustainability Trust we talked about earlier.
Right.
It's designed to provide that financing that countries need to implement reforms,
Right.
the kind that strengthens their economies and makes them more resilient to those unexpected economic,
Earthquakes.
earthquakes, yes.
Exactly. It's like earthquake-proofing your house. You hope it never hits, but you'd rather be prepared.
Exactly. And that ties into Georgieva's broader point about building a more resilient global economy.
Yeah.
She stressed the need for investment in 3 key areas: climate, technology, and people.
Okay, let's break those down.
Great.
Climate, we've touched on that with the Sustainability Trust.
Right.
But how does investing in technology play into this whole resilience idea?
Well, Georgieva argued that for emerging markets like Thailand, tech isn't just about cool gadgets anymore. It's about boosting productivity, unlocking new opportunities.
Right.
She really sees it as a major driver of economic growth in the 21st century.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
The world is becoming more digital.
Right.
Thailand can't really be left behind.
Exactly.
But what about the people part of the equation? That seems a little broader than just economics.
It is broader,
Yeah.
and that's important. It's about investing in education,
Right.
healthcare, social safety nets.
Right.
Those things that catch people if things get rough.
Right.
Georgieva's point was that a truly resilient global economy is one where everyone has a chance to thrive,
Right.
not just those at the top.
So it's not just about GDP growth.
Right.
It's about making sure that growth translates into a better quality of life.
Exactly.
Not perfect.
Yes, exactly. And that's a message that I think really resonates with the challenges that Thailand's facing, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. But we've been very laser focused on the IMF's perspective.
Right.
What about the World Bank?
Right.
They're a major player in this whole global economic game, too.
And are.
Do they see eye to eye with the IMF, or are they singing a different tune?
Well, that's the tricky part.
Okay.
The sources that you shared
Right.
didn't actually include any specific World Bank reports on Thailand's economic outlook.
Oh, right. That's true. It would have been interesting to compare their takes.
It would have been fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're deep divers, not quitters.
That's right.
So, based on what we do know about the World Bank,
Okay.
can we make some educated guesses about their likely priorities for Thailand?
Absolutely. So the World Bank is all about development,
What?
especially in emerging markets.
Okay.
They tend to focus on issues like poverty reduction, education, healthcare, infrastructure, things that really underpin long-term economic growth.
So given Thailand's status as an upper middle income country,
Right.
what might they be recommending for, like 2024 and beyond?
Well, based on their past work in Thailand, I'd say they're probably still pretty keen on seeing continued investment in human capital.
Okay.
Things like education, skills development, making sure that the workforce is equipped for a changing job market.
Makes sense. You need a skilled workforce to compete
Exactly.
in a globalized economy.
Absolutely. Infrastructure is always a big one for the World Bank,
Okay.
especially in rural areas.
Right.
Closing that rural-urban divide is crucial
Right.
for a more balanced
Right.
and inclusive growth.
Right, because that economic growth doesn't always trickle down to every corner of society.
Yes.
Okay, so if we connect all these dots,
You're right.
the IMF, World Bank, the global trends, what's the overall picture for Thailand's economic future? Should our listener be feeling, hopeful?
Here's the bottom line. Thailand definitely faces a very unique set of challenges and opportunities as we head towards 2024 and 2025.
Okay.
The global economic slowdown, the potential for, those trade wars Georgieva mentioned, those are serious concerns.
No doubt. But we've also uncovered some reasons for, like you said, cautious optimism, haven't we?
We have.
Yeah.
Thailand's proactive policies, those fiscal buffers,
Right.
infrastructure investments. Those provide a strong foundation.
Right.
And then embracing things like capital market development,
Right.
regional cooperation within ASEAN. These are smart moves that could lead to more sustainable growth.
So it's not a guaranteed win,
Right.
but it's also not a guaranteed loss.
Exactly.
It sounds like Thailand's future is still very much unwritten, which is kind of exciting.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole economic deep dive so fascinating.
Right.
It's not about predicting the future with certainty.
Right.
It's about understanding the forces at play,
Right.
the potential paths ahead, and the choices that, individuals,
Yeah.
businesses, and governments can make to shape their own economic destinies.
Well said. So listener, as you navigate your own personal economic journey here in Thailand,
Yeah.
remember that the future is not, preordained.
Right.
There are choices to be made, risks to be taken,
Right.
and opportunities to be seized.
I love it.
Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay curious,
Yes.
because the most exciting chapter for Thailand may be yet to come.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into Thailand's economic outlook. We hope you found this journey through global reports, economic analyses, and even a Cambridge lecture illuminating.
Absolutely.
We encourage you to keep exploring these topics, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.
Keep diving.
Until next time, keep learning, and we'll see you on our next deep dive adventure.